can't work. I'm running out of savings. And I said, just hold on. We're gonna get you a good result on this. And we were able to get ultimately $2 million. And I cut him a very substantial check, and he basically, is back on his feet and going forward again in life. And those are the type of things that make you feel good.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm joined with Stephen Sweat, who works at the law firm that bears his name, the law firm of Stephen M. Sweat out in beautiful Los Angeles area. Stephen, how are you doing today?
Good.
Very good. Well, as always, we're going to jump over and take a quick look at your website. This is his website. I think I'm showing the right screen. There we go. Great URL, by the way. I don't always comment on this, but when a guest has a wonderful URL, I comment. Victimslawyer.com. Victimslawyer.com. Really easy to remember. Tells you what it is that he does. I love it. It's great. So you can, as always, we'll have a link to his description down below in the show notes. Victimslawyer.com. You can also call him toll free at 866-966 5240. All of that, of course, is on his website as well. He practices all around the Los Angeles area, from LA to West Covina to Riverside, and basically all stops in between. And we're going to be digging into a lot of what he does today. Before we get started, as always, I do like to read from our two sponsors as well. Our first sponsor today is Groove Funnels. If you love spending $5,000 to $10,000 to build a brand new website, and you love paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month to host that website, have a platform that allows you to sell to your customers, have webinars and host products and meeting rooms and everything else, then by all means, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Funnels, the all-new, all-in-one website sales funnel platform, all-in-one Swiss Army knife from internet legend Mike Filsame. And right now, if you visit theattorneypost.com/groove, you can sign up for free, literally no cost, no credit card needed, and you can build an entirely functional website, sell products, etc. There's literally no cost. You can build, I believe, actually up to 3 fully functioning websites at theattorneypost.com/groove. They have a huge list of apps in the platform. Again, it turns it into a sales platform, a webinar platform, a sales funnel platform, a website, a blog, an affiliate platform, basically anything you can dream of, you can imagine, you can do it with Groove Funnels. So visit theattorneypost.com/groove. Our second sponsor today is National ERC. You may have noticed the world just went through a pandemic, and many businesses were forced to shut down, reduce their hours, and had supply chain issues and interruptions. Ultimately, they suffered reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. But what you may not know is that Congress passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. This is functionally free money for your business that can be spent in whatever way you think makes the most sense. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate and see how much you could get back by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business they work with gets back over $200,000, and again, that's money that they can reinvest in their business as they see fit and never needs to be repaid. The calculator is completely free, and there's never any fee unless they secure funding for you. That's nationalerc.org. Alrighty, so I am joined with Stephen Sweat. Stephen is a distinguished attorney based out of Los Angeles, California, beautiful, sunny Los Angeles. And you guys will have to forgive me today. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to be a little coffee, but that's life. You guys are used to my voice anyway. He boasts over 2 decades, over 25 years, as his website says, dedicated to personal injury, wrongful death, as well as employment law, business litigation, and a few other things. His journey from a diligent student who paid his own way through college and law school to establishing his own law firm, the Stephen M. Sweat Personal Injury Lawyers, APC. It's a testament to his commitment to perseverance and just his skill. He's renowned for his dedication to representing the little guy against powerful corporate entities, and his commendable work ethic and passion for justice have garnered him numerous accolades, including the Super Lawyers designation, a recognition from the National Trial Lawyers Top 100, and memberships in the prestigious associations like the American Bar Association and Consumer Attorneys of California. An embodiment of honesty, integrity, and sheer dedication. Stephen stands as a beacon for individuals seeking justice and fair representation. So question number 1, Stephen, as always, is, that was a mouthful to get out there, but I'm sure I missed some things. So question number 1, what did I miss?
Well, I have some hobbies.
Oh,
I
I
just,
think you are muted, Stephen. Mic check
oh,
1 2. Now you're muted. Now you're okay. Say again.
you hear me now?
Hmm, This is a problem. We will pause for 1 moment, ladies and gentlemen, and then we will renew. Maybe I can pause. Where's my pause button? Uh, it's a well-oiled machine. It really is. Oh, I'm still sharing my screen too. That's why I can't find my pause button. Ooh. All right, you guys didn't see this. And the magic of video editing, I'm just going to make sure that you never even know what happened, but we had a brief audio glitch on my end. We've got it fixed. Question number one that I've got for you, Stephen, is having said all that, which was a mouthful, I'm sure I missed a lot. What did I miss?
Well, I have hobbies, obviously. Martial arts is the main one. I just received my brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've trained in Muay Thai and other disciplines. And I'm trying to get my black belt before I'm 60.
You got a few years left.
Now, 7 years. I gotta get going.
That's awesome. I was watching the other day a discussion about how the vast majority of martial arts are entirely overrated as fighting styles, precisely because a lot of them they're work well if you fight within a system where somebody else is using the same moves against you. So they're designed for like sparring, but like on the ground fighting is one that's just hard. Like, and so they would have these martial. This is nothing related to anything we're talking about on this show today, but I just think it's fascinating. And I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was one of the ones that did really well. But when you took it down to like a MMA or mixed martial arts level, the people that knew a whole variety and weren't trying to like stay within one discipline were the ones that seemed to do the best. So it sounds like you've got some experience in multiple kinds. What's the best benefit you get out of martial arts?
Well, just you get a lot of benefits, stress relief. You learn discipline, focus. You learn how to control your emotions, not get too amped up, which is all good qualities of an attorney, especially a litigation lawyer.
Gotcha. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and I mean that's what a lot of people would say as well. And I think the test of time bears that one out. It definitely is a great way to grow in discipline. And you guys, if you're listening to this, go join some sort of martial arts, even if it's kung fu, jujitsu, mixed martial arts, karate, taekwondo, whatever it is. Learning a skill, any skill, makes you smarter, makes you better, and that's what we're dedicated to here, is getting better every day. So, all right, question number two, Stephen. If I didn't know anything about you, and obviously I know a few things here, but if you and I were stuck on an elevator for 30 seconds or a minute, and I was like, oh, hey, Steven, tell me about what you do. What do you do? What's your pitch? Who do you help? And tell me what sets you apart.
I help people that are injured, obviously, in various types of accidents, pretty broad range, representing clients everywhere from, your car accidents all the way to sexual assaults and everything in between. So that's who I help, and I've been doing it for close to 26 years now. And I don't know how many millions of dollars I've recovered at this point, but it's a lot. And so consistent success over 2 decades plus here.
Gotcha. No, it makes good sense. It's always good to see someone that's been in the business for a good long while, that's been recognized for a long while. I was looking at your website earlier. You've got your 10.0 from Justia or Ustia and Avo and Martindale Hubble. We got A plus on business, better business, the BBB, whatever you say, Better Business Bureau. So absolutely, those are wonderful things. So, well, let me ask you this: you've been doing this for a good long while now, Stephen. What got you into law? Were you the kid that everyone else was playing GI Joe and you were playing Matlock and Perry Mason, or is it something you just kind of stumbled into? And then once you got into law, why PI?
Well, when I was going to college, I noticed that I had kind of a gift for gab, so to speak, and did well in, speech classes and English and, related subjects. So law just seemed to be a good follow up to my undergraduate studies. And what got me into law, I just like helping people, So it was a way for me to to help people and obviously make a living doing it.
Gotcha. And so PI just was the area that you said, you know what, these are the people I want to help. This is the area I need to go into. Did you ever dabble in other areas of law? Did you ever try family law, criminal law, or anything like that?
Early on, I dabbled in some criminal defense and also bankruptcy, believe it or not. But I that was kind of short lived. I didn't particularly like the clientele in criminal defense, and bankruptcy was, kind of boring actually. So I decided I would become a trial lawyer and, stick with personal injury, and been doing that, like I said, 20 plus years.
Gotcha. Well, that's awesome. I've I've often said that of all the different areas out there, I think that PI is one of the most unique ones because you guys really do you fill a niche, right? There's a need in the marketplace, excuse me, for a lot of people who are injured and have no recourse. Most people can't afford an attorney. I think the national average right now is over $500 an hour for attorneys, and I'm sure out in LA in general it's probably a lot higher. So for the average person to even like sit down and talk to an attorney would be such a daunting prospect. But I think the way that most injury attorneys work, I believe you as well, is free consultation, and I'm assuming if you decide to take on a client, you don't collect a fee unless you're successful in getting them money, and you've been so successful that you've gotten millions and millions and millions of dollars for your clients over the years, which again is a testimony to your success. But I just think that's such a beautiful model in a lot of ways because it allows you to help people that really do need help. So I think that is just I don't know. I've just always thought it's fascinating. Um, one of the sponsors I just read from obviously was nationalerc.org. And I mentioned the pandemic we all just got through, going through, and it changed a lot of things for a lot of people. One of the things I found very interesting is to ask, different attorneys around the country, because different states, even different cities had different responses to the lockdowns. So having gone through that pandemic we just did, and God willing, it's done and we're not going to see that again, knock on wood. Can you tell my listener, Stephen, about how the pandemic affected you? How did it affect your firm, your practice, the way you interface with clients, the way you went to court and everything else? And has any of it changed the way you do your business permanently, or have things gone pretty much back to normal?
Well, it affected me quite a bit, actually. The when the entire economy comes to a standstill, I think everybody's affected. As far as the personal injury game, there were nobody was driving cars, so there were no car wrecks.
Yeah.
Nobody was really out and about, so there's no, premises accidents. And so it brought my practice to a standstill, really. And, because again, I do everything on contingency, it created kind of a bubble in the system that, hit me probably not till last year, really, but there was a lull there on cases in the pipeline, so to speak, and that really kind of slowed me down for
Yeah.
about 12 months. And then as far as the practice of law go, I actually think it benefited the practice because of all the Zoom, the advent of Zoom hearings, Zoom depositions, Zoom mediations. I think all those things keep me from having to put on a suit and drive downtown and pay 40 bucks for parking, and just to go in and hear the judge tell me, here's the trial date, So I think all that's beneficial. That's actually lasted up through now, and I think it's going to probably be permanent.
Gotcha. Did you find Zoom hearings and Zoom depositions easier, harder, just the same? Do you find it easier to read somebody if you're in the same room versus via Zoom, or did you find that it really didn't make a big difference?
On a run-of-the-mill case, I don't think it makes a huge difference. I do think that if you've got a contentious witness or a witness that's not going to be, ahead of time, they're not going to be forthright, or, I hate to say it, but honest, then I like to still do an in-person deposition so that I'm in the room. I'm not. I've had instances where I'm doing a Zoom deposition and I can tell that the attorney for the deponent is in there coaching the witness. So I get all that kind of nonsense stopped. And I do videotape depositions so that, there's no ambiguity as to people's tone or their demeanor. So it all depends on the case.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes sense. Do you think we'd ever go to like a full Zoom trial? Like, and do you think it would be incredibly difficult? I imagine it would be to like have to present to a jury of 12 TV screens as opposed to being able to like, look over, because you can't really make eye contact. Even here in Zoom right now, I can simulate eye contact by looking into my camera, but in reality, we're not face to face. Do you think that would be a detriment to the practice of law?
Well, it's funny you say that because there actually were Zoom trials that were going on out here in Los Angeles for a while. And now we've gone back to in-person trials. So I never did a Zoom trial, but I've talked to some of my colleagues. They have mixed reviews on it. Like you said, that it's hard to make a connection with a jury over Zoom. But it is obviously, it turns probably a 2-week trial into a 3 or 4 day trials. So that's good. But I think we're all going to go back to in person as far as trials go.
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't know what the legality would even be. I feel like if I was on the receiving end of a Zoom trial and I lost, I would try to get that judgment thrown out and say this was an unfair hearing or something. I don't know. It raises some interesting questions, and those are questions we definitely don't need to go into. But there are questions I ponder sometimes when I think about the pandemic and the response to it and everything else. So Stephen, you've been practicing law for a good long while, 25 years, going on 26. That's a silver anniversary, right? I am sure in your practice of law, you probably hit a lot more home runs than you strike out. But we all have moments in our careers, in our lives, where we win some and we lose some. And I'm a firm believer, as my listeners know, that failure sometimes is the best teacher. And so I'm sure that in your practice of law, there have been a couple of cases or a couple of things that have happened over the years where things just didn't go your way. Maybe it was a case decided the wrong way. Maybe a witness said the wrong thing, whatnot. So can you let my listeners know about 1 or 2 times during your practice of law where you experienced something you would consider a failure, but then what did you learn from that? And how do you carry that forward to make sure you're giving the best care to your clients moving forward?
Yeah, I always say, when you fail, you just, fail forward. And I can think of one case in particular a few years ago that went to trial. I had, all my exhibits and jury instructions and so forth on my laptop, headed off about 2 hours north of here, had to get a hotel room. So, and I probably had, I don't know, $50,000 in costs out of my own pocket into this case. So went up there. The second day of trial, someone stole my laptop out of the hallway in the courtroom. So I had to come back to LA, buy a new laptop, and, download all the information again, go back up there. And, I went all the way to the jury. Prior to being able to get to the jury, I had some evidence that I thought was crucial to my case. Judge said, we're not going to allow that in. So that put a monkey wrench into things. Proceeded forward to jury. Jury goes out, stays out for 3 or 4 hours, and then says they don't have a verdict. So they're coming back tomorrow. I actually came back to LA just to sleep in my own bed for one night. Went back down there. When I got down there, I couldn't find a place to park, and I parked in a parking lot that I wasn't familiar with. I was a little bit late, so I'm running to court. I go under a railroad track, and I feel something wet on my ear. I look down, a pigeon had pooped right on my blue suit with a big white stain on it. So I'm in the bathroom trying to clean that off. I go into the courtroom. Jury goes out for another 6 or 7 hours. So at this point, I'm thinking, I've got liability tied up. They're just debating about how much money to give me. Jury comes back, defense verdict, you get nothing.
Ooh.
My client starts crying. I've got $100,000 in medical bills. What am I going to do? And I said, listen, I put, like I said, $50,000 in costs into this. I probably put, 250 hours of my time. I did everything I could. I'm sorry, but sometimes you just come up short. She cries. We're walking down the stairs. She's crying. She's, following me all the way down to the sidewalk. Finally, I just said, listen, I gotta go. Went to my car, looked on the windshield, $45 parking ticket. So that's kind of how it ended. And what did I learn from that? Well, when I got back to my office the next morning, obviously I felt terrible. But there's nothing else you can do other than pick up the file that's on your desk and keep moving forward. And that's what life is all about, is perseverance.
Yeah. That's got to be rough, though. It's got to feel like the universe just like kicked your teeth in almost. I mean, that's everything from the pigeon to the parking ticket. Even like that's the insult. That's the icing on the turd cake.
Yeah. And if one thing I forgot to mention, 2 days up of being up there, my wife called me, and I had 2 young kids at the time, to tell me that my dog had died. My kids were freaking out, and I was like, what, there's nothing I can do from up here. So
Wow.
that was one other thing that happened that week. So it wasn't the best week of my life.
As it sounds almost like a country western song. You know what they say? What happens when you play a country western song backwards? You get your car back, your dog back, your wife back, and everything else. Like, man, that's rough.
What it
That's
was.
rough.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
the flip side, I'm sure, is that you've had some amazing wins as well. I mean, again, nobody bats 1,000 if you play long enough. And in 25 years in the game, you're going to have a couple of strikes. It happens, and everybody understands that. But I'm sure you've had some wonderful successes as well. Some of those cases that are just the ones that, maybe when you're falling asleep at night, sometimes you think about the bad cases, like, oh my gosh, that was just terrible, and I can't believe everything fell apart. But then you switch over and you think about the good cases and the things that you've done that have made a huge difference in people's lives. Can you let our listeners know, Stephen, about a couple of times in your practice where you've just had those moments where you just know you made a difference, you feel so proud of what happened, or you thought all the odds were stacked against you and there's no way the jury was going to decide in your favor, and then they did, and they gave you more than you thought? Or, tell our listeners about a couple of your big wins.
Well, I had one recently. I had a gentleman that he was driving along on the freeway. There was another car, actually a Tesla, that was using self-driving mode. The driver, I guess, kind of freaked out with the self-driving mode and overcorrected and ended up running him into the median. Major injuries. He was a construction worker, so he was not able to do that anymore. He and I probably had 1 or 2 conversations a week over a period of a year and a half. And he's telling me, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I can't work. I'm running out of savings. And I said, just hold on. We're gonna get you a good result on this. And we were able to get ultimately $2 million. And I cut him a very substantial check, and he basically, is back on his feet and, going forward again in life. And those are the type of things that make you feel good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You gave someone a new lease on life in all reality.
Right.
That's huge. That's absolutely huge. So 25 years you've been in California, you've been in LA, and I'm sure you've noticed things have changed. I'm sure that, So here's a random question, and I oftentimes will brief my guests for you listeners at home. I'll brief them on some of the questions I'm going to ask, but I always come up with questions on the side because I'm always just kind of curious. I'm sure you've noticed trends, maybe over 25 years that have come and have gone. And I don't know, maybe there's more trends than I would think of. Maybe there's fewer trends than I would think of. But what are some of the changes or the big shifts in the legal landscape that have happened over the last 25 years? Whether that's the types of cases you see, like maybe one type of case, like nobody uses voicemail anymore, or at least not like the old answering machines or whatnot. I don't know what kind of an injury you'd have or something like that, but like certain types of devices, certain technology have come along that have probably caused, like for instance, the Tesla, the self-driving car, right? Those are things that 10 years ago, the idea of getting into a self-driving car, let alone an accident with a self-driving car, just would have felt like science fiction, but it's becoming more and more common. What are some of the big shifts and the big changes you've seen in your practice?
Well, believe it or not, when I started practicing, the um, the cell phone wasn't, everybody had a flip phone. I can remember getting my first BlackBerry, and I thought it was the most amazing thing I've
Oh,
ever.
cool.
Yeah, and I worked for a guy that had been in the business about 25 years when I started to work for him, and he still told me to use a dictaphone and speak into it and have the secretary type it up. He's like, lawyers shouldn't be typing their own documents or briefs. You should let the secretary do that. Um, so it's gone all the way from that to now where, like I said, you've got all the Zoom, you've got everybody has a smartphone. I think that's benefited people. I don't know how many times I've been able to get either dash cam footage or cell phone footage that has helped me with proving up my case. And it's just technology's amazing now. As far as legal research, you can do a lot of legal research just on Google at this point. But your Westlaw and your LexisNexis, I remember I used to have to type in what they call Boolean searches
Hmm.
when I first started, when I was in law school. And now it's just, you type in King's English and it gives you everything you need to know. So I think it's definitely, technology is definitely it's benefited everyone, but it's obviously, the same in the legal profession.
Gotcha. Do you recommend people have dash cams? Do you think that's a useful device?
I do, and I think that I've been able to use dash cam footage quite a bit. Been able to use GoPro footage for bike and motorcycle accidents. So yeah, I mean, there's always, unfortunately, when people get in accidents, even when it's clearly their fault, just human nature, they try to deny that they caused the accident. If you've got video, it's really powerful.
Mhm. Gotcha. Well, if you listeners are at home, we'll try and put a link down below to some great dash cams because why not? It's kind of a neat concept, and I never thought about it. I've got teen drivers now too, so it's like I should probably have a way to check up on them and see how they're driving and make sure everything
Right.
is going the way it should. So that's kind of funny. Um, so what has been, let me ask you, this is more of a fun, just kind of off the cuff question. I'm sure in 25 years of legal practice, you've had some people that have been big inspirations to you or, big mentors to you who helped you when you first got started. What are some of the biggest inspirations or who are some of the biggest mentors you've had on your journey through the legal world?
Well, I've had quite a few of the, I would say, top 10 trial lawyers in California that I've worked cases with and been mentored by, and that's invaluable. It's always better to have a team rather than just feel like you're Don Quixote, one man against the world. So yeah, I mean, um, again, yeah, I mean, some of the top guys have always been helpful for me in my profession.
Excuse me.
Well,
There's that illness coming back again. Good night. It's one of those days. So you're living in LA. I'm sure you're pretty involved and do things in the community. What kind of things do you and your firm do in the area? Do you work with any communities and charities, any organizations? Tell our listeners about what it's like to be an attorney in a community like that.
well, it's hard to, in a big city to try to find your community, so to speak. I've been involved in a lot of charities. I am on the board of TLC, Trial Lawyers Charities, which we do a lot of outreach and assistance for lower income people. I've been on the board, not on the board, but on the volunteer end of some organizations that provide free legal services to underserved communities. And so I try to feel like I do some good. I feel like I do good even in my own practice, but outside the practice as well.
Gotcha. Um, I just had another question. Oh, I was on the tip of my tongue. Oh no. Sorry, I was thinking about three questions ahead, and every so often I'm like, oh, I need to write that one down. I even have my pen here, and every so often I just kind of forget to write down the question. It was going to be related to what we were just talking about. Oh well, I'll come back to me. I think I was going to at least partially ask you about. Well, okay, this is a totally off the wall question. It's not even related to what I was going to talk about, but we were talking about self-driving cars earlier. Do you think that car accidents, do you think they're going to trend down once people start having more and more self-driving cars? Do you think that, and this is just free advice, obviously you don't have to weigh in any more than you want to, but do you think self-driving cars are actually as safe as everyone thinks they are? Do you think they're more safe? In the instance that you were talking about earlier, the guy corrected and the correcting seems to have been what caused the accident. Do you think people can trust them? What's your thought on that kind of technology and how it is playing a role in the shifting of society?
Yeah, it's hard to say. You've got all sorts of technology. You've got anti-lock brakes now. You've got front end avoidance, front end collision avoidance technology. You've got, like the dash cams we talked about. As far as self-driving cars, I think we're far from that being a practical reality. Like that one instance I gave you as an example. I think ultimately we might get there, but we're definitely, in my opinion, not even close at this point. At some point, maybe in my lifetime, maybe not. I think we may get to a point where all the cars are, autonomous and nobody's really operating their own vehicle and everything is, done a little more safely than it is now. And it may be that puts the PI lawyers out of business, but if that's the case, then great. Everybody's personal injury attorneys really, if they're any good, they want, you know, society to be safer than it is now. And if that comes through technology, then so be it.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. How do you approach a case if you think that 'cause this is what it was, you're talking about the dash cams and people being at fault and partial at fault and everything else. But how do you approach a case when you think maybe your client is partially at fault? Does that play into the decisions that you make moving forward?
Sure. I mean, from the initial intake, I try to, I obviously don't take cases where I think the majority of fault lies with the person that's trying to hire me. Otherwise, I wouldn't stay in business very long, especially on a contingency. But listen, California, as is many other jurisdictions, is a comparative fault state. So there can be some fault on my client, and it still doesn't kill the case, as long as the majority of fault lies with the other party or parties. Then you just kind of ferret those issues out as you go through the case.
Gotcha. What's your strategy for dealing with insurance companies? Are there any that are, you don't have to name names necessarily, that are, but are there insurance companies that are notoriously hard to deal with, or very difficult to deal with? And what's your strategy when dealing with them?
There's a lot that are hard to deal with. In fact, it's getting worse and worse, in my opinion.
I think that's because there's more and more of them rather than just like the main carriers, or
I I think, well, out here, all the auto insurance carriers have gone to in-house counsel set up, so they have their attorneys all in-house. They have a set budget for uh, defense work, so they're not paying an outside law firm an hourly rate anymore. So their opinion a lot of times is, um, come at us all you want. We've got our overhead is set through our
yeah,
in-house counsel. So um, that's an issue. It all depends on, in my opinion, the adjuster. If you get more experience, more seasoned adjusters, a lot of times you get, earlier resolutions and pretty fair settlements. The problem usually when you start off is you're dealing with a fairly low level. A lot of times they're new people that don't have a whole lot of experience, and they just think that, millions for defense, not a penny for tribute, and we're going to take you to the wall, and they think that's the way to go. So a lot of times once you file a lawsuit, you get a litigation adjuster that's a little more experienced, and you can get a little further there and try to talk sense to them.
gotcha. Gotcha. Um, are there any specific challenges that come about practicing PI in, let's say, Los Angeles, as opposed to even just the surrounding area or California at large? Or are there any unique idiosyncrasies of California law or LA law that you think other people are just totally unaware of, that would catch people off guard normally?
Well, it's a big city, and there's a lot, always a lot that's going on. So, you've got, but, on the flip side, you've got a lot of lawyers competing for the business, and that becomes tough. Sometimes, I mean, I can't count the number of billboards that are all around town and in the greater LA area, and they're just, seems to me it keeps getting worse. But so you got a lot of settlement mills and guys that are just churning and burning. So you have to kind of compete against that. I try to use that as a selling point for me, that I take good quality cases. I don't take a lot. I take enough that I know I can put my full time and effort into it and get a good result. And that's probably one of the main things as far as practicing law in the big city, so to speak.
Gotcha. Have you noticed a rise, especially in LA? I live in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. So we only recently got like those little e-scooters and stuff. We started to become a big deal around here, but I'm sure you guys have had them for the better part of a decade at this point. Have you noticed a rise in like e-scooters and e-bikes, accidents and things like that? Has that become a big shift, or do they stay in the bike lanes and people just respect the bike lanes?
No, I've had quite a few cases with e-scooters and e-bikes. I've got one right now that one e-bike ran into another e-bike. So the scooters, they were a big thing for about 2 or 3 years there. It's kind of waned now, where not as many people are riding them. But I've had quite a few cases where they encourage it. The e-scooter company actually tells you not to ride the e-scooter on the sidewalk and to ride it in the street.
Mhm.
And so obviously that's a guy on a little scooter is not something most people in a car are looking out for. So,
Mm-mm.
um, especially in intersections, there's been quite a few of those I've represented in the last few years.
We had one of the big companies that brings them in that you can rent them with the phone app or whatnot, and they brought them in for about a year in our town, and I think they got rid of them because I don't think they got enough use here. We're a very tiny town, 7 square miles, tiny, 10,000 people. It's a college town though. There's a college that swells the population by 50% or whatever. And but it was just interesting because the main people I saw using were little kids, and these kids would be driving them on the streets, on the sidewalks, not having no clue what the rules are, the law was. And obviously, you're supposed to be 18, I think, to use them. But if you got an app, mom and dad help you get an app one time, and they've got their phone or whatever, they could just use them. So I just thought it was fascinating, and the idea of small children on scooters in traffic is just terrifying. But
Yeah,
small children on scooters on the sidewalk is probably
right.
equally terrifying.
Yeah, then you're supposed to wear a helmet, nobody does, and
Yep.
yeah, I mean it's like you said, you have the app, it's not gonna check your date of birth, it's just gonna check and see if you got the
Have
money
you
to
paid?
right,
If you can pay, you can ride.
right, right.
Maybe not the wisest decision ever. Um, let's see here. So, Stephen, you've been really great, really, really generous with your time, and I don't want to take up your entire afternoon. So here in a minute, I'll probably ask you my two closing questions, just to prep you for those. Question number one is going to be this: if we can go back in time, meet young Stephen, fresh out of law school, and give him some advice, what advice would you give yourself, and why? Other than, of course, buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold till 60K, right? Um, And question number two will be this: if I gave you my magic pen, and my audience knows this pen came from a Benedictine monastery, a bunch of monks, and so apparently it's blessed and holy or something, because apparently it can strike laws from the books, add laws to the books, or edit laws that are on the book. So if I were to loan you my pen and allow you to make a change to a law, add a law, or delete a law, what law would it be and why? And while you're pondering that, we're going to jump back over and we are going to take a look again at your website. Again, I'm talking with Stephen Sweat, the lawyer who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, the law firm of Stephen M. Sweat, Personal Injury Lawyers, APC. We'll have a link, as always, down below to his website. That is a wonderful website, victimslawyer.com. That's victimslawyer.com, just how it sounds, exactly how you expect. And again, it should be the very top thing in the description box, whether you're watching this on YouTube, whether you're listening to this on the podcast, etc. You can also give them a call toll free at 866-966-5240. That's 866-966-5240. Our final sponsor for today is Rank with News. And I lost my notes for this particular read through because that is life and that's how it goes. There we go. Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and others, and see those articles ranking locally, even nationally, sometimes in as little as 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and oftentimes permanently. This is functionally guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking indefinitely. Visit rankwith.news or rankwithnews.com to learn more and to book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can help launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers with Rank with News. All righty. So, magic question time, Stephen. We go back in time. We meet young Stephen, fresh out of law school, and you're able to go whisper really quickly. You got, maybe one or two sentences, but you can get a real nugget of truth out to him. What advice would you give yourself and why?
Well, I would give myself the advice that you get more with honey than vinegar. I think early on when you come out of law school, you're full of what in vinegar, and you think that everything is, knock down, drag out, fight because it's an adversarial system. When in fact, when you're more of a diplomat, you get a lot better results. So that's probably the advice I would give myself.
I think that's good advice just for life too, right? I mean, we oftentimes can be overly harsh, overly combative, and I think that there is a real virtue to being a little more cool, calm, and collected, a little cool behind the ears or whatever, cool under the collar. It's good advice. All right. Magic pen time. I'm going to give you my pen, Stephen. You can make one change to any law. Again, this can be a big law with major national sweeping ramifications, or this can be that stupid law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate and get $45 parking tickets while pigeons poop on you, right? You can make one change. What are you going to change?
I would change the minimum requirements for auto insurance. In California, for example, you can be driving around with a minimum of $15,000 in bodily injury liability coverage and quote unquote be insured. And you might as well have nothing if you got that much. So there's some states that have as much as 250,000. I think if every state in America had that, I think we'd all be we'd be better off and more protected.
$15,000 is not going to get you very much. I had one of my boys had an allergic reaction once a couple of years ago, some pollen or something. His eye swelled up beyond what I'd ever expected. I immediately was like, all right, let's get you some Benadryl and then get you into the ER. Give him the Benadryl, get into the ER. By the time I get in there, it's kind of gone down a little bit. And they talk to him. They figure out it was probably a pollen reaction. They give him one of those little break ice packs and give it to him. And they're like, no, you did all the right things and good job. And we leave. And then I get a bill for like $1,500 for an ice pack. An ice pack. So yeah, $15,000 if you're in any kind of a major, and this is out in the middle of nowhere, Kansas too, where things are more reasonable and prices are lower. So $15,000 in LA, I'm imagining that's what, a Band-Aid and some Neosporin.
Yeah, and there's been some real sad instances where, I look at the person that we could potentially sue and they don't have any assets. I've got a $15,000 policy and I've got either a catastrophically injured client or sometimes even someone that's been killed. And you got to tell the family that, they're going to get $15,000. Most of, in those instances, I end up waiving my fees and just doing it as a courtesy. But it's sad, it really is.
Yeah. That's got to be rough. And again, I don't even know. Sometimes there's just no recourse. I mean, that is how it is. So that's a good change. I think that, making a change in that regard is probably a good change. Well, Stephen, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners today. I've enjoyed the conversation and I feel like I've learned a little bit. I always like to dig into different states. Again, California, very, very different from flyover country here in Kansas, but it's a really neat place. I do always like to let my guests have the final word as well. So do you have any parting thoughts, any last words or wisdom or anything else you'd like to let our listeners or leave our listeners with?
No, it's been fun talking to you. I think, we should all be a little more cordial with each other. I think there's been too much animosity in the last few years with politics and everything else. And let's all get along.
Be polite, you idiots.
Exactly.
Well, that's good advice, and just it's good life advice again, and that's always maybe the best takeaway. Let's all remember that we're all people, we're all humans, and we all make mistakes sometimes, but that's okay. Well, this has been the Attorney Post. I've been chatting with Stephen Sweat of the law firm that bears his name, the law firm of Stephen M. Sweat, personal injury lawyers out in Los Angeles. As always, this podcast, though we do deal with lots of different legal topics, does not constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter you need help with. Now, I can say, having had a good conversation here with Stephen, that if you have been injured and you're in the Los Angeles area, he would be a wonderful resource to visit. And of course, you can look him up online by going to victimslawyer.com. Links and phone number and everything else are down in the description below. If you're listening to this on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're listening to this in any other podcast repositories, comment, rate, star, thumbs up, like, whatever it happens to be. If you know somebody who has been injured and could use the help of Stephen, feel free to share this podcast with them as well. You can share it via all social media apps and everything else. And until next time, this is Justin reminding you, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys. Until next time.